Hello and welcome to the British Chamber of Commerce Singapore's podcast channel. We're thrilled to present in-depth discussions on business, global affairs and news across Singapore, ASEAN and the United Kingdom. Thank you for your continued support and we hope you enjoy this episode.
Hello and welcome to this podcast hosted by the British Chamber of Commerce and Tanglin Trust School. I'm Michael Holliday, the Director of Co-curricular at Tanglin Trust School, and I'm delighted to be speaking to you today with Jonathan Dove on my left and Paul Hughes. So welcome, gentlemen, to this conversation. And if I can start by asking you to introduce yourself, maybe Jonathan first, and let us know who you are, a little bit about your background, and why you are here with us today.
Well, so I'm Jonathan Dove. I'm a composer. That's what I do full-time. I'm particularly known for working with the community, doing things that go outside of conventional performing spaces. I've written now something like 32 operas and some oratorios. So there's nearly always I'm telling a story. And there are often voices in what I write. I started off playing piano for opera rehearsals in my 20s, and that led eventually to actually writing operas for some of the companies I'd been rehearsing for.
Fabulous. And Paul, a little bit about yourself as well?
I trained as a musician, as a composer and pianist, way back, and my most recent role has been as director of the BBC Symphony Orchestra and the BBC Symphony Chorus and BBC Singers. So I've been working a lot with new music, with composers, and that's how I come to be here working on this particular project.
And I think obviously we've been coy then with what the project is, a little bit of kind of leading people down that garden path. But this is, as you both know, and I hope lots of people listening know, Tanglin's centenary year. And as part of the commemoration for that, we have undertaken commissioning artwork to celebrate the local art scene and the local cultural scene and to try to leave something of value behind us. And that has taken the form of The Brain by Victor Tan, We Dreamed a Forest by Donna Ong. And this piece that we are commissioning from you, Jonathan, is the third of our pieces of art for our centenary. And this is not your first visit to Singapore to talk about that. And you've come back to Singapore with a piece, with a title. And I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about the piece that you have written for us.
Yes, so the piece is called A Bridge Across the Sea. And it tells a story. It's a story from the Ramayana. It's an episode in this great Indian epic, one of the two major epics, along with the Mahabharata, from I believe around 500 BC. But it's a story that's been told and retold in this part of the world, and it was that was one of the things that drew me to the story. My first trip here, we talked a lot about what the piece might be and what it should be, what we were hoping for from the piece. And so there's been quite a long journey just to find the right story to tell. We knew that we wanted something celebratory, obviously, for the centenary, something uplifting, we hope.
So just to jump in there, so we have this piece which exists and to once again tell the story backwards. Paul, your involvement with the project predates lots of those decisions. In fact, it predates Jonathan. I think what will be interesting for people listening is how do you commission a piece of music? How do you have that idea? And Tanglin obviously had the idea that we were going to do some art, but then that's really where you stepped into the frame. And I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about, well, how that came about, what you're bringing to the project and what you're helping us do.
Absolutely. Well, it first began when you reached out to me through our mutual friend Angela Dixon to discuss this concept that you wanted to commission a piece of music, a major piece of music. And we talked a little bit about the kind of project that it might be, the kind of involvement of professionals and young musicians from within the school and the wider community. And immediately I had one person in mind, which was Jonathan, because I've known Jonathan
Very
for
fortunate you
years.
said Jonathan's name at that point. We were both quite nervous.
No, it was always going to be Jonathan. And at the time, the original dates of this particular concert made it very difficult for him to do that But fortunately, the centenary concert, which is now happening in April the 23rd, came a little bit later, so Jonathan was able to fit it into his schedule. And because he's so brilliant at writing for communities, for adults, for amateurs in the most exciting and thrilling way, I just don't think you could have got anybody better. And to leave a lasting legacy, not only through this piece, but through the other artworks that you have created, I think it's a remarkable achievement for a school. So that's when I came on board to make the introduction with Jonathan, to bring him on board, to liaise with his publishers, who are very supportive, and take it from there.
Great. And so you were then kind of talking to one another, I think, in the background after that visit, and you particularly trying to find the right story to tell. Was this the immediate one you settled on, or did you have to go through a process to get to this story?
No, there were quite a few wrong turnings. I mean, I think we all agreed in our first visit that something relating to the sort of the feeling of Singapore being an island in the middle of the sea voyages, sea journeys, and I thought then, there's these Tennyson poems, for example, The Voyage of Muldoon or Ulysses, which involve, heroic, epic sea journeys, and so I reread those, thinking, that'll be easy, but no, because those particular poems both end in a very kind of sort of like a distressed whimper, rather than the festive uplift that I'd been hoping for. So I thought, well, it's not that, but maybe is it one of the voyages in the age of discovery? Then you think, oh no, but those led to the destruction of First Nation civilizations, and it's very complex. You're talking. I don't think I wanted to get into the complexities of empire and how we now feel about that. So I thought, but I also wanted, as I said, to find a story that belonged here. But that had a wide appeal. And so I turned to my most regular collaborator, who's a writer called Alistair Middleton. And fortunately for me, he has read all literature, and so he's always able to put his finger on just the thing that I need. In this, obviously, I was not going to set the original Sanskrit. It's not a language with which I'm familiar. So I knew that I was also going to ask Alistair to write a modern English version that we could perform here, and when he suggested this episode from the Ramayana, I could see that was immediately very exciting when he just mentioned the idea of an army of monkeys building a bridge across the sea. And it was an extraordinary thing. I want to see it. But then I thought, would this be cultural appropriation? And so I had a kind of struggle, and then so for a while I was looking at further stories again. But again, finding that none of them were quite right. But the monkeys kept calling me back. And eventually I thought, well, actually, this is a story that has been told and retold, so I'm not really plundering any one source. And also, it's a story that's demanding to be told here. And it's a story that deserves to be potentially more widely known in English-speaking countries. So, and it is this, it's got a great celebration kind of built into it. This extraordinary, spectacular, and unexpected achievement. I mean, the bridge is built across the sea so that Ram and his armies can cross the bridge and go and rescue Sita, his beloved, who has been stolen from him by the demon Ravan. And Hanuman, chief monkey, but who I think rather later on becomes identified as a divinity. But it certainly is a sort of magical creature who can change his size. He's able to grow to an enormous size and leap across the sea to find Sita. But Ram is the person who has to rescue her, and Ram cannot change his size and cannot leap across the sea. And so Hanuman summons all of the monkeys to build this bridge. And I thought there was also something about this idea of a collective endeavour, which I feel is something very close to the heart of a school.
I think anyone listening, well, I hope anyone listening is going to feel as excited as I do to hear that amazing story being told. And as you think about your compositional process, as you think about text, how does that story affect the music that you write? And Where do you begin when you're going to craft a piece that's going to try and tell that kind of epic story?
Yes, it begins with, I suppose, finding the right sort of colours. And so, if you're to use a sort of painting analogy, and you're thinking, what's a building going to sound like? And you imagine, you can imagine a building site, you can imagine the sound of the pile drivers. You're thinking, big, heavy sounds, percussion. What are the sound of the monkeys? And I was imagining the kind of the laughing sounds, and I was remembering the walk along the tree walk in the McRitchie Reservoir, my very first ever trip to Singapore, and these very, let's say, interactive monkeys that were there. And I kind of wanted to capture something of that sort of feeling of fun about the monkeys. Storytelling is always about finding contrasts, and where do the contrasts need to be, and where do things change. So I started exploring different musical scales, and I used some scales that are the basis of some Indian ragas. So it's not at all it's not to sound Indian, but it's just to make a connection. And so there's one of those scales has an unusually large number of dissonances possible in it for the demon Ravan, who snatches Sita on the beginning of the story. And a different scale from Purvi mode I used for Sita, which has a sort of feeling, I think, of longing in it. You can feel her longing for Ram to come and rescue her. Hanuman and the monkeys are not completely pentatonic, but more or less, which I think of pentatonic, which is music you could play on the black notes of the piano. It's pretty much all folk music has a pentatonic core. These are the sounds that are easiest for us to sing, but I think they also have a kind of a simplicity and a feeling of something natural. And the back of my mind is often remembering that Wagner, when he wrote The Ring, the sounds of nature are pentatonic. And I think that it has always influenced me. So I was looking, so I had these different contrasting sounds in terms of just the notes I'm using, the harmonies, and then also thinking of different kinds of instrumentation. So all of this is long before I try and set any of the words. I sometimes describe it as being a bit like, the Renaissance masters that would start with the background. You see the mountains, the landscape, the sort of the big picture stuff, and then it gets a bit nearer, and you get some buildings, and then some figures, and finally the master comes in and does the hands and the face, which are like the melodies. And so, in fact, the melodies, the things that the audience is most aware of, might be the last thing to actually emerge in the process.
And listening to you speak about that, you have that clear sense that music has a power to communicate and to amplify the story as well. And is that something you recognise, or is that not the case? And is that something peculiar to classical music as well? Thinking about the kind of medium that you choose to write in.
Well, classical music has got this just a fantastic and very long tradition to draw on. And I mentioned Wagner, but that's one particularly spectacular composer. But there are many who have shown how different instrumental colours and different harmonic colours can help us to tell a story. I think I've realised over time that I am a musical storyteller. That's really how I identify.
And Paul, sort of picking up on that, and I know you've been involved in a lot of commissioning of new music, that balance between people feeling worried or concerned about classical music and thinking it's not for them. Jonathan, you used some technical language, that pentatonic scale or the rags around those scales, and can feel off-put. And I think when you're commissioning new music, you've got to balance the need for innovation and accessibility. And you've got a lot of experience of doing that. How do you oversee that? How do you help with that process when you're working with a composer or when you're thinking about commissioning something?
It's very much in the preparation of an audience, and the anxiety around classical music is often not so much around the music itself as around the going to the concert hall and how one should behave and how one should dress. and so on and so forth. So if one can remove all of those anxieties and prepare the audience with extracts, with short social media films, with all kinds of means by which they can be drawn into the process as well as the outcome, so that when they finally get to hear the concert, it is the culmination of a journey rather than something that is just parachuted on them. I feel very strongly that that's how contemporary music takes its place, because all the music that people like and love was new music at some point, obviously. And this is such a great story to tell, and it's a story that's relevant to Singapore but isn't place-specific to Singapore, and so that's why it's going to have a life well beyond this performance, I think, and create the legacy that you want. But there's nothing to be afraid of here. It's an exciting, thrilling story, wonderfully told.
No, and obviously, as well as telling this story and letting people know, what we're hoping is that people will be as excited as we are about the project and want to come and hear the concert on the 23rd of April.
Yeah, I mean, it's on a large scale. Very often, commissions they can be chamber music or they can be solo pieces or whatever. But here, we've got a large chorus, several large choruses, a symphony orchestra, 2 soloists. This is a big piece. This is a major event anywhere. And for the school to be doing it, I think is just terrific.
Hearing that list of people involved, Jonathan, I think, and then what you said earlier around your kind of collaborative, or the collaborative nature of lots of the work that you do. How do you navigate writing for that? How do you navigate kind of putting that on? What are the key ingredients to successful collaborative pieces and then performances?
Well, experience is certainly a large part of that, and I've been working with groups of different kinds of ability and different backgrounds, different levels of experience for some decades now. When I started out, I actually involved the performers in the composing process. So we would write things together. And I think I learned a lot from doing that about what ordinary people have in their heads, what kind of music we all have, the music that we can share. And I suppose I am particularly interested in that, in what music do we share, not doing something that is so strange and extraordinary that no one can get the hang of it.
So we have a piece commissioned of great scale, great ambition, and as well as being instrumental in that even happening, Paul, you're also playing a big role in the putting on of the concert and just understanding what are all those ingredients in a successful concert, namely perhaps who's doing the playing. I know you've spent a lot of time working on that, and I wonder if you could just whet the appetite of our potential audience out there of who they're going to come and listen play this amazing piece that Jonathan's been describing for us.
Absolutely. But first, just going back a few steps to the conversations that Jonathan and I had as the piece was being formed about how many soloists would there be? Would there be soloists? Would there be a narrator? Roughly what size orchestra? How big is the stage? All of these kind of things needed to be considered, and we talked a lot about that and eventually settled on a piece for a soprano and a tenor soloist. And so those had to then be secured and find the right people. And we've been incredibly fortunate to find 2 fantastic soloists from Singapore, one living in London, Victoria Songwei Lee, and Jonathan Charles Tay, who not only lives in Singapore but teaches at Tanglin Trust School. So we've got 2 great soloists. Then had to find an orchestra, and the Resound Orchestra were very enthusiastic to join forces with us. And so again, working on what the orchestration was that Jonathan had in mind, how many young instrumentalists would come from the school or from the teaching staff of the school, so that, if you like, Mervyn Beng, who has been fixing the orchestra, needed to know exactly which instruments he needed to fix and which ones the school would be providing. And that's been sort of constantly shifting. But that's also tremendously exciting. So having brought together these forces and then the forces of the Raffles Singers and Toban Sheng, their chorus director, and Boon Hua Lien, the conductor. I mean, my job has been to sort of bring all these together, if you like, and we met all together for the first time yesterday to talk through the project, and it felt really, really real. It was going to happen, and that's always a tremendously gratifying moment for anybody who's producing a concert when people all turn up and they know what you're supposed to be doing.
And hearing Paul talk about all those people who are going to be performing it sort of brings home the fact that you're, I don't know what the analogy you like to use is, but you're birthing or creating this piece, but then you're also handing it over to someone else to bring to life in the concert hall. How does that feel? Is that a great moment? Is there a sense of loss about that you're giving it over? And what role do you play as that piece is?
Does that make me the midwife? I'm not sure.
I think probably does, yeah.
It's a great moment. I always love it. I get the piece as far as I can on my own, and I can perform it in a sense on my own. I sing through the whole thing, and I play the piano. So the orchestra is my fingers, and that's as much as I can do to give people an idea of what it's going to feel like, what it's going to sound like. Obviously, I've written it out. I've written what the singers need to sing, and I've written what the orchestra's going to play. The wonderful thing is that when the real singers sing it, it always sounds better. And it's particularly thrilling for me because I get used to hearing my own voice, because I'm a kind of hands-on composer. I sing and play everything that I write, and I walk around the park listening to it, and I listen to it as if somebody else had written it, to try and think, oh, am I enjoying this? Is any of this boring? Is it really coming over? And so I've heard myself perform it a lot by the time the real singers start to do it, and so I really appreciate hearing the wonderful sounds of. Well, I've already worked with our soprano soloist, and she's got a fantastic voice, and it was because I always thought it was a good idea, but until she sang it, I didn't know that we would ever really hear it, and I've heard already some of the senior students singing what they're going to sing, and I think, oh yes, it's all better, and that is the process of handing over, which will continue actually up until the premiere. I will be on hand, obviously, for the rehearsals with the orchestral players, and they will have some questions in rehearsals about how do we do this, or why did you do that, and so. It's very gratifying.
I remember that first time in your studio when you played the whole thing through for me. I mean, 30 minutes of non-stop singing all the parts, including all the chorus, both soloists, and bashing hell out of the piano at a volume way greater than any orchestra probably. I was just, my goodness, how do you do that? But that's when I really thought, okay, this is going to be tremendously exciting, and that's what you heard, I think.
Yeah, I then whisked its way over the internet to us, and a similar experience in my kind of dining room at home with the score and you on my earphones. So yeah, very exciting. I have really just one question to finish, and I suppose it's obviously been a big part of all of our lives actually over the past 18 months, and is going to be for the next few months as well. What are both of your hopes for the piece? What do you want beyond that moment? The 23rd happens, the premiere's finished. What do you hope? What are your hopes for the piece in that concert and beyond that concert?
Well, in a way, that concert is the most important. It's the reason that the piece has been written, and I want everyone to be captivated by the story and kind of carried away by it. After that date, I just hope that other choruses and orchestras will take it up and be as excited as we are about the story we can tell, and about the music that everyone has to sing together.
For me, in the conversations that we had about the piece and about the creation of the piece, was always in my mind what would come after the performance, what would be the legacy. So having a piece that involves professional musicians and young musicians, there aren't so many of those around, and most of the ones that are around have been written by Jonathan. So that already puts it on a rare list for performance. And making sure that it had all of the right elements that I felt would give it a life beyond the performance. And already I'm talking to one of the orchestras in the UK about putting it on there for what could be a European premiere. Quite possibly, and it will always carry that mark that it was created, it was given birth, if you like, here in Singapore for the school. So that's always been my ambition, that the piece would be successful for Jonathan, successful for the school, successful for your publishers, and that many other musicians would get as much fun out of it as we are all doing.
And it has to be said that if the premiere is as good as we feel it's going to be, that will make an enormous difference to the future life of the piece. If it were a damp squib, then it would never be heard of again. But if people are excited about it, and if we'll have some kind of document.
It's a great story, and how many pieces have monkeys? Yeah. This makes it very special.
I think no danger of a damp squib, and I hope that having listened to this, you're as excited as we all are about the piece and about the premiere. And if you want to be there, you want to be involved, you can be. There's a link in the description of this episode where you can go to buy your tickets. And thank you so much, Paul. Thank you so much, Jonathan, for your time in this podcast. I hope to see you there on the 23rd. Thank you very much for listening to this episode.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of the British Chamber of Commerce Singapore's podcast channel. Before you go, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a rating and review on Spotify, Apple, Google, and other podcast platforms. If you enjoyed this episode, please spread the word by sharing it across your network. For more information about the Chamber and what we do, visit our website at www.britcham.org.sg and tune in next time for a brand new episode.